the morning I found the receipt. I almost let it go. It was just sitting there, half tucked under the passenger seat of his car. I'd gone out to grab my sunglasses. I left them in there the night before. Simple, ordinary, the kind of thing you do 100 times without thinking. But that morning, I saw it, a receipt from a restaurant I'd never been to. A place called Côte Sud, French, expensive. The kind of place you take someone when you want to impress them. The date was March 14th. I remember standing in the driveway, barefoot, cold pavement under my feet, reading it over and over like the numbers would change if I stared long enough. March 14th. Our anniversary. The night Marcus told me he had to work late. The night I made pasta from scratch and fell asleep on the couch waiting for him to come home. I put the receipt back exactly where I found it. I don't know why I did that. Some part of me just wasn't ready. Wasn't ready for what came next. I went back inside, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table in silence. And I started planning. My name is Nadia. I was 31 years old when my life, the one I thought I had, started coming apart at the seams. And I was 32 when I built a completely different one from scratch. But here's the thing nobody tells you about rebuilding. It doesn't look like rebuilding when it's happening. From the outside, from Marcus's perspective, it looked like I was falling apart. And I needed it to look exactly like that. Marcus and I had been together for 6 years. Married for 3, he was charming. God, he was so charming. The kind of man who walked into a room and somehow made everyone feel like they'd been waiting for him. Broad shoulders. Easy laugh. He had this way of tilting his head when he listened to you that made you feel like the most important person on earth. I used to love that about him. Later, I'd understand it differently. That tilt of the head. That focused attention. It wasn't presence. It was performance. We met at a work conference in Chicago. I was there representing my company, a mid-sized marketing firm. He worked in corporate finance. We ended up at the same after-event dinner, seated next to each other almost by accident. And we talked until the restaurant closed around us. He called me the next day, and the day after that. By the time I flew home, I was already gone. Already his, looking back now. I was so easy, not because I was stupid. I wasn't stupid, but I was lonely in a way I hadn't admitted to myself yet. I was 35 hours into a career that consumed me, living alone in a city I'd moved to at 26, and I had convinced myself that work was enough. That independence was enough. Marcus made me feel like maybe it didn't have to be. We moved in together after 8 months, engaged after 2 years, married in a vineyard in the Hudson Valley on a Saturday in September, with 60 people watching and not a single cloud in the sky. I have a photo from that day. Just one that I kept, not from the ceremony, it's from before. My mother fixing my veil. Both of us laughing at something. I don't even remember what. I kept that photo because in it, I look completely free. The cracks didn't show up all at once. They never do they? It was small things first. Things I explained away. He started staying late at work more often. I understood. He'd been promoted, new responsibilities, pressure. I told myself that. I believed it. He started being on his phone more. Not secretively exactly, just more. I'd look over and he'd be scrolling, turned slightly away. He'd close an app when I sat down next to him. I told myself it was work emails. I believed that too. He became distracted during dinners. Not every night, just some nights. He'd be somewhere else in his head. I'd ask what he was thinking about, and he'd say, "Just work stuff." And I'd nod and refill my wine, and we'd both pretend that was normal. I should have seen it earlier. Know that now. But when you love someone, when you've built a life with someone, you don't want to see it. You find a way not to. Your brain is so loyal to the version of them you fell in love with that it will bend reality to protect that image. Mine did, until the receipt. After I found it, I went back to living as if I hadn't. That part was harder than I expected. You'd think it would be simple. You know something, You act on it. Done. But it's not like that. When you've been sharing a bed with someone for years, sharing meals, sharing mornings and midnights and fights and ordinary Tuesdays, your body doesn't just switch off because your mind found something it couldn't explain away. I still made coffee for both of us. I still laughed at things he said. I still kissed him goodbye in the mornings like nothing had shifted. But inside I was somewhere else entirely. I started paying attention differently. Not frantically, not in that manic, obsessive way you see in movies where someone starts pulling strings and scribbling on walls, quietly, methodically. The way you might monitor something you want to understand before you disturb it. I noticed things. The way he angled his phone screen away became a habit, not an accident. I noticed it happened specifically when a certain name appeared, not a work contact name, just 3 letters. Cal, short for something. I didn't know what yet. I noticed he started going to the gym on Tuesday and Thursday evenings. He'd never cared about the gym before. Now he had a specific schedule. I noticed his cologne changed. Just slightly. From the one I'd given him to something darker, more expensive. I noticed that when he laughed on the phone with me, it was the same laugh he used on our first date. Light, easy, performed. The laugh I now recognized as the one he used when he wanted to be liked. Not loved, liked. I cataloged all of it, and I said nothing. About 3 weeks after the receipt, I did something that changed everything. I went to Côte Sud alone. On a Tuesday afternoon, I told myself it was just to see. Just to look. I dressed simply, sat at the bar, ordered a glass of wine I could barely afford. The place was beautiful, warm lighting, velvet banquettes. The kind of quiet that meant something. I asked the bartender casually if they had a loyalty program. He said yes. I asked if I could look at the menu to consider signing up. He handed it over with a smile. And while he was distracted with another customer, I asked one more question. Offhand, like it didn't matter. Do you have any private dining rooms? My husband is planning something for our anniversary, and I think he may have looked into a reservation here. The bartender, young guy, maybe 24, blinked at me. We do have a private room in the back, yeah. It's really popular for date nights. Date nights, not anniversaries. Date nights. I thanked him, finished my wine, and left. I sat in my car for 11 minutes without starting it. Then I started it. Drove home, made dinner, smiled when Marcus walked in, and the plan I'd been building in the back of my mind sharpened into something real. Here's what nobody understands about a woman who's been blindsided. We don't shatter. Not immediately. We go quiet. And in that quiet, we become the most dangerous version of ourselves. I'm not saying that to sound threatening. I'm saying it because it's true, and because I wish someone had said it to me before, so I would have understood what was happening inside me. I wasn't losing my mind. I wasn't unraveling. I was reorganizing. All that love that had nowhere to go, it became fuel. All that trust that had been used against me, it became clarity. I saw Marcus differently now, not with bitterness yet, not with rage. With clarity, I saw that he had been using my predictability as cover. My steadiness as camouflage. He knew I was reliable. He knew I would work, come home, make dinner, ask about his day, sleep beside him, and not look too closely at anything. He had made a calculation, and I was going to recalculate. I need to tell you about my work situation at the time, because it matters. I was a senior marketing strategist at a firm called Whitmore & Lane. Good job. Solid salary. Comfortable, not exceptional. I'd been there for 4 years. I was respected but not advancing. I'd been passed over for a director role the year before. And I'd told myself it wasn't personal, that I'd wait for the next cycle. That was a lie I told myself too. I had an idea. Something I'd been sitting on for almost 2 years. A boutique brand consultancy, smaller, more specialized, working directly with women-owned businesses on brand identity and digital strategy. I had the contacts, I had the expertise. I had a business plan half written in a folder on my laptop that I kept opening and closing without finishing. The thing stopping me? Fear, and if I'm being honest, Marcus. Not because he told me not to. He never said that. But he had this way, when I'd mentioned it in passing, of nodding thoughtfully and saying things like, "It's a lot of risk, and maybe when we're more stable and you'd be giving up so much." And I'd absorbed those words, because I loved him and because fear found them useful. After the receipt, I opened the folder, I finished the plan. Over the next 2 months, I moved in 2 directions at once. In one direction, I remained exactly the wife Marcus expected me to be. Maybe even more so. I was warm, present. I cooked more. I suggested weekend plans. I didn't pick fights. I didn't pull away. If anything, I became easier to be around, because I wasn't afraid anymore. When you're hiding something, and even something righteous, you stop being afraid. You become focused. I know how that sounds. I know it sounds cold, but it wasn't cold. It was survival. It was the quietest, most controlled version of self-preservation I've ever practiced. In the other direction, I was building. I hired a business attorney, a woman named Priya I found through a friend of a friend, and I had her help me set up an LLC, separate account. Separate everything. I started reaching out to former clients privately, testing the waters. 3 of them said yes immediately, said they'd been hoping I'd go independent. One of them became my first retainer client before I'd even officially launched. I updated my resume, my portfolio, my LinkedIn. Not dramatically, just quietly upgraded. I had coffee with a woman I'd admired for years, Simone, who ran her own successful agency, and told her I was thinking about launching. She offered to mentor me. Monthly calls, real guidance. I started saving differently. I'd always contributed to our joint account first, savings second. I reversed that. Not massively, enough that Marcus wouldn't notice, but steadily. Marcus noticed none of it because Marcus wasn't watching me. That was the detail that broke my heart and freed me at the same time. He had stopped watching me long ago. I found out who she was in April. I didn't go looking for it dramatically. I didn't hire a private investigator or go through his phone. In the middle of the night, I simply ran into them. I was leaving a client lunch in Midtown. Preliminary conversation I'd set up under the guise of catching up with a former contact who I hoped to bring into my consultancy. We'd finished early. I was walking to the subway, and there they were, coming out of a coffee shop on 48th Street. Marcus, and a woman. She was, and I'll be honest about this because I think it matters, beautiful. Tall, natural hair, wearing a green coat, laughing at something he'd said. She touched his arm when she laughed, just briefly. But the ease of it, the familiarity of it, landed in my stomach like a stone. Marcus saw me first. I watched it happen. The color leaving his face. The half-second recalibration. The way he stepped almost imperceptibly sideways, creating distance between them without appearing to. I walked toward them. I smiled. "Hey," I said. "What are you doing all the way over here?" "Meeting," he said. "Just finished." "Client thing." He said it so smoothly. "Not a flicker." "Oh, nice," I said. And then I looked at her. She met my eyes, steady, calm. Something in her expression that wasn't guilt exactly. More like assessment. "Hi," she said. "I'm Callie." Callie.Cal. I shook her hand. "Nadia," I said. "Nice to meet you." We said a few more sentences that I don't remember. I told Marcus I was heading home, kissed him on the cheek, said goodbye to Callie, and walked toward the subway entrance. I went down 3 steps. Then I stopped, gripped the railing and breathed. 1 breath, 2 breaths, 3. Then I kept walking. That night, Marcus came home and behaved as if nothing had happened. He was slightly more attentive than usual. That overcorrection that guilty people do. The small performances of normalcy. He asked about my day with more interest than he'd shown in months. He suggested we order from the Thai place I loved. I let him. I sat across from him at our kitchen table, eating pad see ew and watching him talk about something at work. And I thought, how much longer do I need to do this? The answer surprised me. Not long. I was closer than I realized. By May, 3 things happened nearly simultaneously. First, I had 4 clients confirmed for my consultancy. Real clients, real contracts, real money starting in July. Second, I found an apartment. It was small. 1 bedroom in a neighborhood I'd always loved but never lived in. Ground floor of a brownstone. A little garden out back. The landlord was a woman in her 60s who showed it to me herself and told me the last tenant had stayed 11 years. I said I'd take it. I paid the security deposit from the separate account Marcus didn't know about. Third, I called my mother not to tell her everything. Not yet, just to hear her voice. To let her ask me how I was and actually answer honestly. I said, "I'm okay, Mom. I'm figuring something out." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Good. You've been too quiet lately." I could hear it. Mothers always hear it. I told Marcus on a Saturday in June, not dramatically. Not with evidence spread across a table. Not with a confrontation that would have made good television. I told him calmly. We'd just come back from a walk. He was making coffee. I sat down at the kitchen table and I said, "I want to separate." He turned around. I saw something move through him. Surprise first, then a rapid calculation, then something that I think was relief that he tried to disguise as hurt. He set down the coffee cup. "What?" "I want to separate," I said again. "I found an apartment. I've spoken to an attorney. I'd like us to be adults about this. Nadia, I'm not interested in the conversation where you ask me why and I explain it and then we argue about it," I said. "I think honestly you know why." The silence that followed was the longest of my life. He sat down. He didn't deny anything. That, right there, told me everything about the 6 years I'd given him. He didn't fight for me. He didn't reach across the table. He just sat down and looked at his hands and after a long moment said, "When are you thinking?" And I thought, there it is. 2 weeks, I said. He nodded, and that was almost that. Almost, because what came next, I didn't plan for it. And it showed me something about Marcus I hadn't fully understood yet. He didn't fight, but he talked. Over the following 2 weeks, as I packed my things slowly and methodically, Marcus began a quiet campaign. Not to win me back. I was clear enough that he seemed to understand that wasn't available. But to win the narrative, he called his friends. Told them I'd suddenly decided to leave. That he was blindsided. That I'd been pulling away for months and he'd tried everything. He framed it as my sudden, inexplicable unraveling. He was careful with what he said. Never outright lied, just sculpted. I know, because our mutual friends started reaching out to me. With that particular tone of concern that's actually confusion. They'd heard one story and I wasn't matching it. My friend Derek texted, "Hey, Marcus says you're going through something? Just wanted to check in." Going through something. I'd been betrayed by my husband, and I'd quietly rebuilt my entire life in 4 months while smiling across the dinner table every night. And in his telling, I was the one going through something. I didn't correct the story. Not then. I just moved out on a Saturday in early July. A small moving truck, a few friends, my mother who drove up to help. We got everything into the new apartment by early afternoon. My mother hung curtains while I assembled a bookshelf. My friend Rena brought takeout and a bottle of cheap champagne. We ate sitting on the floor, and I felt, for the first time in years, like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The thing about the story Marcus was telling? It had a flaw. His version needed me to fall apart. His whole narrative, that she just suddenly lost it, that she was pulling away, it only worked if I looked broken on the other side. He assumed he had spent 6 years learning the version of me that was loyal, steady, and quiet. He'd seen me absorb difficulty without falling over. But he'd never seen me decide. He didn't know what I looked like when I had decided. I launched my consultancy in August. I called it Meridian Creative. I built the website myself. Stripped back, clean, confident. I wrote the copy. I designed the logo. I used the last of the money I'd saved in the separate account to run a small, targeted campaign. Within the first week, I had 2 more inquiries. By the end of August, I had 6 clients and a waiting list. By October, I had hired my first contractor, a designer named Jess who was brilliant and meticulous and became one of the most important people in my work life. I was making more than I'd ever made at Whitmore and Lane, doing work I actually cared about. Coming home to a space that was entirely, completely mine. Cooking what I wanted. Sleeping in the middle of the bed. I know that sounds small, sleeping in the middle of the bed. But if you've ever shared a life with someone who stopped seeing you, you understand why the middle of the bed can feel like the most revolutionary thing in the world. I should tell you what happened with Marcus, because it didn't end the way he expected. By September, the story he'd been telling, about my unraveling, had started to collide with reality. He found out about Meridian Creative through LinkedIn. I know because a mutual contact mentioned it casually. "Oh, I saw Nadia's new company." That's exciting. And apparently the look on Marcus's face was something. He texted me. I'm not going to share the whole message. But the general shape of it was surprise, and underneath the surprise, something like anger. The tone of someone who expected to be the one who came out ahead and had discovered, inconveniently, that the math didn't work out that way. He said, "I didn't know you were planning all that." I wrote back, "I know." 2 words. He didn't respond. There's one more thing. A few months after I moved out, I ran into Callie again. This surprised me. New York is vast, and yet somehow it is not. I was at a gallery opening. A friend of mine had a piece in a group show, and she was there. We saw each other across the room. I thought about leaving. Instead, I walked over. We stood in front of a painting for a moment. Abstract, big, all deep blue and fractured gold. She spoke first. "How are you doing?" "Better than expected," I said. "And I meant it." She nodded. Looked at the painting. "He told me you were separated," she said. "When we met, that you'd been living like roommates for over a year." I let that sit for a second. "No," I said simply. "We weren't." She closed her eyes briefly. "I know," she said. "I figured that out." I looked at her, really looked, and I saw something I hadn't expected to see. Someone who had also been deceived. Not in the same way. Not with the same stakes, but deceived. Used as part of a story that served only him. I don't know what made me say what I said next. Maybe it was the painting. Maybe it was the champagne. Maybe it was just that I had nothing left to protect. I said, "He's very good at what he does. But it runs out eventually. For everyone." She looked at me. "I ended it," she said quietly. 2 months ago." I nodded. We didn't exchange numbers. We didn't hug. We just looked at the painting a moment longer and then drifted in different directions. But something about that interaction stayed with me for weeks. Not about Marcus. Not about betrayal or vindication. About the way women can meet each other. In the wreckage of the same person and choose, instead of turning on each other, to simply acknowledge the truth that mattered to me. It still does. It's been 14 months now. Meridian Creative is real and growing and mine. My apartment is full of plants and books and light. I wake up and the first thing I feel, most mornings, is not dread, not anxiety, not that low hum of something wrong that I'd been living with for years without even recognizing it. The first thing I feel is quiet. Good quiet. The kind of quiet that belongs to you. My mother called me last month and said, "You sound different." "Different how?" I asked. "Like yourself," she said. I didn't say anything for a second. "Yeah," I said finally. "I think so. I want to say one more thing, and I want to say it carefully. People sometimes ask, or they used to in those early months, why I didn't confront Marcus the moment I found the receipt. Why I didn't walk in and flip the table and demand the truth, and I understand the impulse behind that question. It comes from a real place. the desire for immediate justice, the idea that righteous anger should be loud. But here's what I learned. Loud anger hands the other person a narrative. The moment I confronted him with the receipt, the moment I became the crying, shaking accusatory wife, I became the villain in his story, the unstable one, the one who couldn't hold it together. And he would have used that. He would have spun it and shaped it and handed it to everyone we knew, by staying quiet, by building instead of breaking. I took that away from him. My leaving didn't look like devastation. It looked like a decision, and that single distinction changed everything. There's a version of this story where I stayed, where I found that receipt and tucked it back under the seat and went inside and made my coffee and convinced myself I'd imagined the implications. Where I kept the peace and kept the marriage and kept the small, careful life I'd built around someone who wasn't who I thought. I almost lived that version. I think about her sometimes, the woman I almost stayed as. She's not weak. She's not stupid. She was just afraid. Afraid of being wrong about the person she loved. Afraid of the rupture. Afraid of who she'd be on the other side of it. I want to tell her what I know now. You are not who you are in that marriage. You are who you become when you stop waiting to be seen by someone who isn't looking. I used to think rebuilding meant returning, going back to some earlier version of yourself before the damage. Back to who you were before you loved the wrong person. But it's not like that. You don't go back. You don't actually want to. The woman I was before Marcus was lonelier than she admitted. Smaller than she needed to be. More easily convinced. The woman I am now, she's been through something. She has scar tissue where trust used to be, and she is careful about who gets close. She doesn't apologize for that. She's learning not to. She runs a company. She has real friends, fewer than before but truer. She sleeps in the middle of her bed. She goes to gallery openings alone, and that no longer feels like failure. She found a receipt under a car seat, and instead of falling apart, she built something. If you're in the quiet right now, if you're in that place where you know something, but you haven't said it yet, where you're holding knowledge like something fragile, not sure when to put it down, I want you to hear this. The quiet is not weakness. The quiet is where you find out what you're actually made of. It is the space before the decision. Use it. Not forever. Not to convince yourself to stay. Not to protect someone who is not protecting you, but use it. To make sure that when you move somewhere real. Somewhere you built. That receipt is gone now. I don't know what happened to it. I don't know if it's still under that seat or if Marcus found it eventually and wondered if I'd seen it. I never told him I had. It doesn't matter. It was the beginning of something he didn't even know he'd started. He thought he was getting away with. He was actually setting me free. I don't think he's figured that part out yet. But honestly, I hope someday he does. Not because I want him to feel bad. Not for revenge. Not even for satisfaction. But because understanding the real consequences of how we treat people, that's the only thing that changes them. And more than I want him punished. I want him to finally understand what he had, what it means to be loved completely by someone who woke up every morning and chose you, and what it costs to throw that away for something that runs out. I haven't dated anyone. I know that's what people expect me to say next. That I met someone wonderful. That the ending is romantic. That love redeemed everything. I don't have that for you. What I have is this. I'm not afraid of being alone. That's the version of the story I wanted to tell. Not the one that ends with another person saving me. But the one where I saved myself and then just lived inside that, without rushing, without proving anything to anyone. I am 32 years old. I have a company I built in 4 months. While appearing to fall apart, I have an apartment with a small garden where something I planted last spring is finally growing. I have friends who knew something. Was wrong before I said it and waited without pressure for me to be ready. I have a mother who heard it in my voice. I have a photo on my kitchen wall from the morning of my wedding. Just me and her. Laughing, the veil caught mid-movement, both of us lit up by something. I keep it because in it, I look free, and I'm working my way back to her. Slowly, but I'm getting there. Someone asked me recently what I would have done differently, and I had to sit with that question for a long time, because there's a version of the answer that sounds like regret, that sounds like I wish I'd caught it sooner or been less trusting, or built those walls earlier. But that's not the answer I arrived at. I would have trusted myself sooner, not about Marcus. About me, every time I dismissed my own instinct. Every time I explained away the distance. Every time I made peace with something that didn't feel like peace, I was overriding myself to protect a version of my life that was already changing without my permission. I would have listened sooner, not to him. To me, to the thing in me that said, "You are bigger than this fear. You are bigger than this need for it to be okay. You are more than the woman holding everything together in a house that doesn't feel like home anymore." I would have listened, and I would have started building sooner. The garden has mint in it now, and some kind of small climbing thing I don't have a name for, but that keeps reaching up the side of the fence like it just decided to. I like that about it. It decided to reach. It didn't ask permission. It didn't wait to be ready. It just started going. I think about that sometimes when I'm standing at my kitchen window in the morning with my coffee, looking out at it. Something decided, and that was enough. That was more than enough. I used to be afraid of what people would think if they knew I stayed quiet. If they knew I smiled and cooked dinner and kissed him goodbye while already building the exit. I was afraid they'd call it cold, calculating. That they'd say a real woman would have screamed, would have thrown things, would have made a scene that matched the size of the wound. But I've stopped being afraid of that. Because the people who would say that have never had to choose between surviving loudly and surviving well. I chose well, and I'd do it again. That's my story. Not the one Marcus would tell. Not the one I would have told you a year and a half ago. Standing in a driveway in bare feet with a receipt in my hand and no idea what came next. This one, the one where the quiet wasn't failure. The one where the rebuilding happened in secret. The one where I didn't lose everything, I just stopped pretending. That what I had was everything. And once I stopped pretending, once I finally stopped, there was so much room.